In this video, I'm going to tell you the top 10 mistakes I and many other beginner keepers have made, so if you are a beginner keeper, you don't make these mistakes. Yo, what's going on, guys? Alright, we are back home, we have the animals.
I've become a plant parent.
Now, to start off, we're going to talk about the temperature. Depending on what species your animal is, there can be a wide range of temperatures that your animal might need. For gargoyle geckos, for example, they rely on just an ambient heat source, which is the heating in the building. And then you have animals like bearded dragons, blue-tongued skinks, corn snakes, ball pythons, boa constrictors. All of those guys require some sort of heat, whether it be an overhead heat or a under tank heating. They all rely on that heat source. Now, people get this wrong all the time because they put their hand underneath the hot spot or on the heat tape and say, it's a great temperature for me. Well, it's not always the ideal temperature for your animal. So I would suggest, before even bringing your animal home, when you're getting everything dialed in, grab a heat sensor. With this, you can do a quick Google search and find the ideal temperature for your animal and use this to dial it in appropriately. With this, if you're using heat tape, you are going to want to use a thermostat. With heat tape, you don't even really need this, but sometimes thermostats are a little bit biased towards a higher temperature or a lower temperature, and this will tell you the exact temperature regardless of how your thermostat works. Now that moves right over to the wrong temperature gradients. Now, for some beginner keepers, you're going to want to heat the entire enclosure up to a higher temperature, but sometimes you don't always need that and you want a nice gradient between your cool side and your hot side and a little bit in between to make sure your animal can choose wherever they want to go in their enclosure to either cool down, heat up, or stay perfectly in the middle. Now, humidity is one of the biggest problems that I see in day-to-day reptile keeping. What a lot of people like to do is when their animal is going into shed, they spray down their animal's enclosure, create a bunch of humidity, and then once they shed, they stop spraying it. Well, that is not always the best case for your animal. Depending on the humidity that your animal requires, do your own research on that. They might need a higher humidity overall, and then when they are shedding, you boost that humidity up just a little bit to make sure they have a complete shed. Now, if you don't know the exact humidity that your animal's enclosure is getting at the specific time, you can add a humidity gauge into the enclosure to provide 24-hour monitoring on that humidity, and when it needs being sprayed down, you can spray it down. Now, 14 years ago, when I originally got my tortoise Shia, I did not have UVB on her. Now, UVB is important for most tortoises, if not all tortoise species. And the reason why I did not have any UVB on said animal was because I never knew. Every book and every video I would watch wouldn't specifically talk about UVB and how vitally important it is for your animal to not only survive long term, but also thrive. And the way I found out is the vet actually had to tell me that UVB is needed for your animal. Now, not only UVB is needed, you also need to have it in the correct range. Some animals, like bearded dragons, need a higher percentage of UVB rather than a Russian tortoise or other tortoises that need slightly less. Now, when buying UVB, there are different percentages of UVB. Some are stronger, like for bearded dragons, and some are weaker for smaller species. But all of them come with a gradient where your animal is best suited for it. Now, unfortunately, that becomes a lot of just purely guessing. And if you don't want to guess, I would suggest getting a UVB meter. This will show me the exact percentage of UVB that is coming down onto my animal in the specific area that I'm checking for. Now, unfortunately, these are incredibly expensive, and that's why only this year I have now gotten it. It is around $200 to $250, so they are more expensive, but if you have a lot of animals that use UVB, it is a no-brainer to buy this and to be able to, instead of just guessing and hoping for the best, knowing. Now, feeding my animals is one of the best things that I love to do with my animals. But when it comes to animals that eat a variety of different foods, specifically omnivores that will eat basically anything, like my blue-tongued skink, which is just my garbage disposal, it can be hard to balance the amount of protein or bugs you're giving them versus the amount of lettuce and vegetables you are giving them. Now, unfortunately, every animal is their own, and my bearded dragon actually eats lettuce rather than most bearded dragons that don't. I got very lucky that my guy likes to eat his lettuce. But for some people, eating lettuce for a bearded dragon is like pulling teeth. And as weird as it might sound, you also might need to tongue feed your animals lettuce if they will not eat it, because it is a part of their diet, and if they're getting too much protein from bugs, they will eventually get obese. And that can lead to shortened lifespans and overall health problems later down the line. Thankfully, there are so many videos online like this one that talk about how to properly take care of your animals in their enclosure. But unfortunately, I still see animals being kept on wrong substrates or no substrate at all, which can actually harm your animal in the long run. Things like reptile carpet can look really good and unassuming, but can actually harm your animal in significant ways. Because the carpet is woven fabric, sometimes your animal's nails can get trapped inside it, and if they are spooked or freak out because their finger is stuck, will actually rip the nail off and injure it. And also, reptile carpet can harbor incredible amounts of bacteria, because every time your animal urinates or defecates, it will just soak into the fibers and unfortunately cause mold and other bacteria to grow and could potentially harm your animal. And it's not just reptile carpet that can irritate your animal substrate-wise, it is also really smelly things. I've come face to face with substrate that can actually irritate my animals. My Russian tortoise Shia was moved onto the ZooMeds reptile bark bedding, and because of the fragrance of the substrate, it actually caused her some respiratory issues, and thankfully we switched back to coconut husk and all is well. This also comes to the small enclosure sizes that people put their animals in. Now, when your animal is a baby, feel free to keep it in a 10-gallon tank or something that is an adequate size for the young baby it is, but like a lot of things, animals grow. Now, when it comes to animals growing, my boa constrictor Aria is currently in this rack system, but soon she will be needing an upgrade to an 8-foot long enclosure. Now, most animals don't need an 8-foot enclosure, but also bigger is better. A lot of people have been starting to move their animals into even bigger enclosures than 4x2x2s and 8x2x2s, and that's what I'm going to be doing in the future, building bigger and better enclosures for all of my animals. Now, like most people, if you are getting your first animal ever, you are going to be so excited to get this animal that you might accidentally handle it too much, too often, or too quickly. When I got my corn snake Einstein, I was so excited to handle him so much, I wore him out every single day. And now looking back on that, that was a pretty bad idea. Thankfully, no consequences came from that, but it could have been really bad and actually injured my animal or made it afraid of me, because every single time it came out, I wanted to handle it until it was super overtired and could potentially try to bite me to let go and go sleep. It can also heavily stress out your animal too if you're over-handling it, and especially if you just bring your animal in from a reptile show where there's big loud noises and all that kind of stuff. That is going to create stress for your animal. So if you're bringing your animal from a shipping container to a reptile store to an expo, your animal is going to want to settle into its environment and get to know its environment before you start grabbing and putting your hands on the animal. Now, I love to see my animals. I love to see my animals come out and show off. And a way some people do this is by only giving them 1 or 2 hides that are very open for you to see into them. But the problem with that is your animal will get stressed out with not having a secure area to go hide in a dark place that might be a little bit more secure than, let's say, a big large log or a piece of big cork bark where light can pass through. And last but not least, impulse buying. Now, as a reptile lover, going to a reptile show might be one of the best parts that I have every year, because there are so many cool, interesting people, but also cool and interesting reptiles. Now, if you go to a reptile show and see small animals like baby tree monitors, baby blackthroat monitors, baby tegus, all of those are small. Now you might think, oh my god, I can put this in my enclosure that's just been sitting in my basement forever, and that might be great and all, but have you done the research about this animal and do you know how big its max size is? And talking about max size, it also comes into the fact that have you done enough research that you know the exact diet, if it needs UVB or not, what are the basking temperatures, and again, how big it gets. Because a tegu might only be $200, but the enclosure is going to cost thousands. So please, before you go to a reptile show and impulse buy the craziest animals, do your research before you buy and go in knowing at the reptile show what I'm going to buy exactly, not buying any animals I don't have done the proper research on. With that being said, I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon members for joining along on this journey of building all around reptiles. You get a weekly video from me and extra bonus content that shows everything behind the scenes and things early that most people on YouTube don't see. So if you want to get more tips and tricks like these mistakes and solutions, subscribe.